It's going to be fun. Okay. Please, if I rotate and spin off camera, someone tell me, because I am going to allow myself to rotate the drawings, just because it makes my life a lot easier to do so. Actually, I would like to bring this whole assembly closer to me. And it doesn't want to let me do it. Not without slanting the camera. Oh, come on. No. All right. Sorry. I thought I could. I can't. I'll get comfortable with the angle I'm at. Except for I just broke everything. This game lose. No. Okay. We're still all right? Yeah, I think we're still all right. Okay. You think I'm zoomed in too tight? No, probably not, because they want to see what I'm doing. I'm zoomed in too tight for my comfort. That is true. Yeah. The round will be a diamond, a rather large diamond. The oval will be color. That's a terrible angle that I'm at. Can't see. All right. Good enough. So, I'm going to start with the diamond. By the way, the steps for rendering stones are different on different media. This is Opalux vellum we're all working on. Opalux is transparent. On transparent medium, you have to lay down a dark layer of color for your stones in order for your stones to read. Like so. For a colored stone, you simply put down a wash of the color, the body color of the stone. Since I'm going to be doing a ruby, I will use a warm red. I am mixing the paint. I don't know if I can even get it to show here. Yeah. I'm mixing the paint so that it is quite heavy in pigment. It's not really thick, but it's a lot of pigment. I keep going back to the puddle of color, the cake, and keeping it intense. Trouble is, when I bring this down to where it's centered on my screen, it almost falls off the screen up there. Once again, I think, as our friend Eric pointed out, because of the wonderful angling they've done with the projector. The color is pooling, it's puddling. When I see it do that, I blot the brush out. Now actually, guys, normally I would be terrified if that happened because I was doing some kind of nice detail. Right now I'm not doing careful detail, I'm just knocking in the base color for the stones. So as long as the color stays relatively inside the area for the stone, I'm happy. Now, both of these are transparent gem material. And the way that you paint transparent gem material is basically so you can see through it. So you want to have light source things happening on the pavilion and different things happening on the crown. Do we remember what a pavilion is? What's a pavilion? We got 20 of us in here. Someone knows what a pavilion. What is a pavilion on a stone, guys? The bottom half below the girdle. And what is crown? The top half above the girdle. Okay? So, on the diamond, the dark side, I paint pavilions first, then crowns. Both these stones, I'll paint the pavilion first, then the crown. The pavilion on a diamond has a dark area on the upper left, because it's like a bowl, guys, like a cereal bowl. The light's coming in from here, and because it's coming in from here, this area is actually shaded. Okay? And then the rest of the stone is light, lighter. Okay? When you're fastening the pavilion of a stone, you're thinking in terms of like slices of pie. Okay? Like a little tiny pizza where the slices are not regular. Okay? Like so. Colored stone, it's tricky, depends on the color and the material. For a brilliant material like ruby, something that has a lot of brightness and contrast to it, you're going to put a relatively darker color in the same area. If it's a sleepy stone, a highly refractive stone, like a tourmaline, excuse me, or an aqua, you would put very little contrast in the stone. So the amount of contrast in the stone indicates the refractive qualities of the stone. I'll be a little more careful on the colored stone because I don't want such a strong dark statement. But I will paint a few large, important triangles, facet shapes. Into the pavilion. And a couple of lines over here. Now, frankly, most of these other lines I'm painting will end up being painted out eventually. But I don't let that concern me. I want to keep showing the stone in progress as I work. I want to understand the stone as I'm painting. So the fact that I'm going to change things later is fine. Now I'm coming in with white, straight white right out of the tube. And on the diamond, now those two facets are too much the same size. I shouldn't have done that. You want your slices, your wedges, to be more irregular than that. And then coming in from the bottom, I want nice bright areas. They don't have to all reach the center.
Is that just random?
Yes. It's establishing a nice pattern, a nice sense of variety in the stone. By the way, the larger the stone, the more of this you do. Small stones, you wouldn't go into anywhere near this much detail. You go crazy. I do like to capture the upper left and lower right of the stone with white. You want to be careful that the white doesn't go outside of the pencil line or brush line you've made, particularly on Opalux, because then the stone just disappears into the paper. Okay? Same process for the colored stone. I'll bring in some crisp delineating lines. In the dark area of the pavilion. And in the light area of the pavilion, which is down in the lower right, I'll paint in some wedges. They don't have to all go all the way to the edge either. I can let them float. If I want. Hope my hand doesn't completely block that. Since I can't really spin these very effectively, I have to spin me. Now, because of the angle I'm coming in at the brush, I'm ending up working with the heel of the brush a little bit, and you can see those tattered looking feathered strokes there. That's a result of me coming in from the angle on the brush I don't have good control over. I will have to fix those. I can't leave them. Okay. That's the pavilion of the diamond and the pavilion of the colored stone. A couple of corrections I have to make. I've got to go into that red stone and fix that hairy facet line I painted in the pavilion on the left. And I've got too much contrast going on in the pavilion of the diamond. It's too black and white. I was aware of that as I was painting it. That would be likely. But I would rather start with too much contrast than too little. As you're about to see, kicking back the contrast is not hard. Whereas once you've lost the contrast, getting it back in an elegant way is hard. So the way I'm going to put less contrast into that diamond is a wash of white paint. Get the white paint on my palette, brush it through, work it through my brush. I just twirl my brush. When I'm pulling paint into my brush, I twirl it. I actually work the paint all the way up into the brush. Notice how you can see the bristles really clearly. Okay? That's thin paint. I will blot most of that out on my blotter paper, and then I will come in. And I will actually paint on top of the dark facets with this wash color. I don't want to take them all. Some I'll cut in half. Some areas I will glaze over completely. I want my brush strokes to still continue going in this radiating linear fashion, because that's what the pavilion of the stone is all about. I want nice crisp triangles. See, by doing that, I've already kicked back that contrast. And it ended up not being enough for me. I want to kick it back even more, so I'll get more white thin paint. Blot my brush out again. I will come back in and go over some of the areas one more time. It's better to do 2 controlled coats than it is to do one really heavy coat, especially, guys, when you're new at this. I have enough experience that I can actually go in with a loaded paintbrush and just thump, and I'll be okay. Most of you do not. Dylan has quite a bit of experience, so he may be comfortable with a more loaded brush. But if you haven't painted a lot, you better working thin. So I need to paint the crowns. And the worst thing in the world that could happen to me happened to me. I've lost my facets. They're gone. Okay? And that pretty faceting pattern is no longer there. I have to bring it back. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to draw it in dark paint first. I'm going to actually paint the facets twice. Once dark, once light. The reason for that is I know I'm going to mess up. And if I know I'm going to mess up, I want to mess up the dark first, because the dark paint will not be as visible in the finished stone. So I will try and reestablish the lost faceting pattern using a dark color. On this red stone, it is a mix. It's neutral tint mixed with some red. This is actually a very important facet I'm painting right now. There are some facets that you can afford to just kind of mess up, and others that you can't. That facet right there is a very important facet. I'm going to stop and back off. Come in from the other side. Reestablish some confidence. That line needs to go like that. This facet needs to come off in here. That facet is there. Center line is there. The upper girdle facets, those are stars I just painted. The upper girdle facets are not as important, but you can indicate them. They make the stone more complex looking, and complex looking is good. Okay, I'm going to take a look at what I painted, and I'm going to assess the damage. Okay? The area over the light area of the pavilion is the least correct. So I am going to repair it. Right now, I've only got 2 colors in the pavilion, guys. I've got red and darker red. So making repairs does not require a lot of fancy painting. But I do have to clean things up a little bit. Once I am comfortable with the amount of whiteout I've done here, correcting those facets, I will paint the white facets now. I'll do the faceting in white. The white crown facets are everything on the upper left side of the stone. In fact, I will paint pretty much all of the star facets that are not on the dark side of the crown. It's important to note that the light and dark areas of the crown and pavilion are reversed. That's how you get the right effect. The light side of the pavilion is down in the lower right corner, because that's where the light catches, like in a basin. The light side of the crown is the upper left side, which is where you would normally expect it, because this is basically a pyramid, a truncated pyramid. So this part of the stone is going to catch the light the way you'd expect it to. I'll only put in as many of these upper girdle facets as I think are helpful. I will outline anywhere it makes sense to outline. That stone wanted an outline. This one still has the very crisp dark outline. That's okay. I think I will fill in this upper girdle as well. So those are the light facets on the oval. Okay? I'm going to do the same process on the diamond. Only it'll be harder because the diamonds ended up being more opaque, so I really can't see the facets at all. But it's all right. I'll be honest with you guys. Before I became a computer designer, so that the facets were printed out automatically when I drew something, I drew stones by outline with my pencil, and I painted all the facets with gouache. I never had drew them or had them in place for me. I've just gotten comfortable. So you need to know what the faceting pattern on a stone is. On a round brilliant, the faceting pattern is interlocking squares. One square that sits true straight up and down, and another square that's rotated 45 degrees. When you draw these squares, you have to make sure that they stay the same distance from the girdle. It's very helpful if you develop an eye for what that distance should be. The resulting table on a round stone should be 53% of the diameter. Those mathematical numbers don't help you a lot, but it is good to have a sense of when your stone is becoming too closed on top and when your stone is too open, so that you can make adjustments. Now that seems like incredibly fussy detail, Is my stone too open? Is my stone too closed? But guys, people who have you do gouache rendering are high-end shops. And in a high-end shop, they know the difference between a closed and an open top stone. And a stone that is too open is the hallmark of a cheap stone. So if you paint stones that are consistently too open, too spread on top, you'll get called on it because they're using this as a sales tool, and the people who are buying are often stone dealers or stone dealers' customers. They're going to go, why did you paint a crappy diamond in my stone, in my ring? You go, what's it? I painted it beautifully. What do you mean? Oh, it looks like a diamond. That's fine, but look how spread the table is. That stone's garbage. They could never sell that stone. And you go, well, but it's not your stone. It's just a painting of a stone, and they just look at you like you're crazy. So, having a sense, and by the way, nobody complains if you paint their stone too nice. That never happens. Oh, you know, my stone's actually a lot more spread than that. Can you spread that out for me? I want my client to see how bad the stone really is. That never happens. Okay, so I've painted the table, I painted the faceting pattern. Now I'm going to come in and paint the white facets. You can see, I hope, the reason why I paint the facets twice. Those dark lined facets are barely noticeable in the finished piece. They just look like more diagonal, flashy, scribbly lines. Nobody goes, oh, you know what? He tried to paint the faceting pattern and he got it wrong. So he had to go back and fix it. And when you're coming in and doing the final faceting work like I'm doing now, I can be a lot more confident about what I'm doing because that dark faceting pattern is there. I will selectively kick some of those black lines down. But essentially, there is the roughly painted diamond and the roughly painted colored stone. Okay? The next step in the colored stone is the scariest step of all. I have to put a wash of color over that stone. I'm going to use a large brush. You don't own one of these. If you want to spend lots of money, buy number 4. I can do it with a small brush. I just doing it live and don't have a lot of time, so going to mix the red. Once again, I want a nice thick, and you can't make watercolor thick, but I want a nice pigment intense, pigment saturated wash. Okay? Now when I do a glaze, the angle I come from is really important. So I'm going to spin this, try and keep it in the camera. I start the wash from here, and I work my way up to the right. The reason I do that is I don't want any puddle of paint collecting on the light side of the pavilion. And I will glaze the whole stone like that. That must dry before I do anything else on that stone. Coming over to the diamond, the white facets are not nearly bright enough. That's okay. I knew that it would probably take 2 coats to do it. But before I do the white facets, I'm going to do the dark. There are dark facets on the crown of these stones, both of them. I save them for pretty much the last, at the end, because I don't want to overdo them. But they're really important to capturing the sense of transparency. On the diamond, well, on both stones, they're the same stones, same facets. They're down in this corner. Okay. So I want a nice bold dark facet here. I'll usually make one of these upper girdle facets if it's a big stone like this. I'll take one of them dark. And maybe that one dark. And maybe a piece of this upper girdle facet. And you can see once I do that how much more transparent the stone looks. I'm looking through the stone now. The white facets now I'm going to put in bold. They've been drawn, I know where they go. I'm going to use a paintbrush that I would normally never want to use, something that has thick paint on it, something that does not look like it's going to have a lot of control. I'm going to pick the facet that I want to be my main highlight facet. Usually it's this one. It needs to be crisp, it needs to be clean. I'll often pick up the facet next to it as well. And I like to capture one of the upper girdle facets on a stone this size. Maybe that one. Okay? Now I'm going to come back into the dark area of the stone and I'm going to paint some of these radiating lines bolder. Perhaps not that bold. Reinforce some facets. When I paint the edge of the stone, instead of painting a smooth line, I might paint little dots so it looks like the light's capturing the edge of facets. The light often travels up the edge of one or more of those stars. I'll let small reflecting lights and lines take place in the pavilion. And I'll make sure I've got some nice bright lights down in the pavilion underneath these dark facets, like that. Look for areas of the stone that look dead. And bring some white into them. See, I can add white dots and dashes and lines to my heart's content now that the structure of the stone is in place. But if I start doing that too soon, I've got nowhere to go. I'd like a little more definition here, here, there. That stone's done. Coming back over to the color. It's the same process, exactly. I will pick my highlight facets. I will often make these larger than they technically should be. And I will do everything in my power to keep them sharp and crisp. not let there be a white upper girdle facet along the edge of these. I will let there be sparks of white. I'll try and catch some sparks and dashes coming around here as well. Sometimes, if the stone needs it, I'll pick up this facet as well. And this stone also has dark facets, which I do by using the neutral tint and the red. It's important not to make these too dark, because if they're all of a sudden darker than anything else on the stone, it looks really funny. So, do a little caution. These will present me with a little bit of trouble, because I had to paint white in them to correct their outlines. And that white wash, that Pro White, is going to want to pick up on my brush. So I'm using a very light touch. That Pro White is mixing in and it's making them slightly gray, which I don't love. I'll come in with a second coat with a lot of red and try and saturate them a little bit more. I've got to be careful though, because I'm working wet into wet. I know our class is over, so I'm trying to move fast, but the old jewelry adage that slow is careful and careful is fast is very true. By trying to come in here and fight that white wash right at this point in the demo, it's very dangerous for me to do. But hey, I'm a professional, they say, so if I mess up, I can tell you it's how it's supposed to look. All right, that's actually not too bad. Okay, that's good enough. They're never good enough. That's the problem. And if you overwork them, you lose something. So you've got to be careful. Stop. Okay, that is it. I'll stop the recording.